Live? Oh wow! Sorry. Hello, I'm live. I didn't quite realise I was then. As you can see, I was fixing my hair. I can't quite see if anybody is watching yet. Yeah, no, we've got one person watching. That's a good start. Because I must admit my internet connection's been a little bit dodgy today, but happy Friday. Thank you for tuning in. We will give it a few more moments for people to join before we kick off in earnest, because as usual, there's a lot to talk about this week. We've got some fascinating brand new records, Catholic records and Canadian records, including a very historically rich collection from the National Archives that pertains to the Jacobite Rebellion of 1715. And then also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history behind the current BBC One historical drama and Booker Prize winning novel, The Luminaries, which is set during the New Zealand Gold Rush. And that prompted me to do a little bit of research of my own and uncover what I thought was quite a fascinating story. So I can't seem to see comments. I'm just going to see if I can fix that. So I'm afraid I'm not sure if any of you are saying hello. Let's just see if I can get the comments to work. How bizarre. I'm experimenting with a new form of Facebook, so please, sorry, bear with me. Let me just see if I can minimize that. Oh, it's all going wrong. Comments. Okay, Ellie has informed me comments are coming up. So I'm just going to ask her, how do I get them to show? Isn't live fun? Right. Sorry, I've done something here. Right, well, I know you're watching and I'm sure you're commenting. Ellie is in. Open a window with the video. Make sure. Sorry, Ellie's just told me how to get your comments up. Sorry, bear with me. Oh, such fun. Right, so hello to everyone who is watching. I will be getting your comments up in a very short second. We're only 4 minutes in, so I'm not panicking too much yet. Right, let's have a look. Yay! Right, got it. So I'm opening the comments in another window and keeping myself muted. Hello! Oh, I feel so much better now. I can see this now. Hello, Anya. Hello, Hillary. Hello, Marion. Hello, Sylvia. Hello, Denise. Hello, Rosie. Hello, Alison. Hello, Angela. Hello, Ian. Hello, William. Hello, Bridie. Hello. Sorry for ignoring anybody. There's too many to go through. Yeah, lovely to see you all here. Few people are having internet connection issues, as am I myself today. So if there is any lag or breakup in the video feed, I do apologise wholeheartedly. Anyway, right, we're 5 minutes in. I'm already using up precious time. What are we talking about today? Well, as I said, brand new records, loads of Catholic records, which follows on nicely from the broadcast I did, I think, with the weekend before last. Brilliant new collection for the National Archives if you're just tuning in. And then after that, we'll have a look at the history of the New Zealand Gold Rush, the how that relates to the Luminaries, which is a series currently airing on the BBC. If any of you have watched it, what do you think? It's part of my plans for the weekend. I've got it saved in iPlayer. Haven't seen it yet, but I will. But I will watch it. I haven't read the novel either, so if anyone has read the novel and can recommend it, do let us know in the comments. So as well as having a look at that fascinating history, because it really was like the Wild West. I think we forget that many frontier parts of New Zealand and Australia were quite similar to the American West in terms of how they looked, the kind of culture there, and outlaw gangs, which is the story I'm very much looking forward to telling you. It's the story of the Burgess Gang, the horrifically murderous Burgess Gang, led by a man called Richard Burgess, London-born career criminal, who is literally like something straight out of a Dickens novel. It's a fascinating tale which shows how the different communities that went out there to seek their fame and fortune. So you had the great and the good, you had the big, powerful families that were kind of funding public works, that were opening up the region and allowing the gold rush to happen. And then you had all the miners who went out there to seek their fame and fortune. And then, as you would expect, you had the scoundrels and the predatory criminals who went out there to prey on these people. Fascinating story. I had a great time digging it out in the records, so I'm looking forward to telling you about that. So let's have a little look at the comments. Melanie, hello from Colorado Springs. Oh, I bet it's beautiful up there at the moment. How's everyone in England finding the weather at the moment? It's disturbingly warm. I'm currently sat with my biggest fan, and I mean that in the literal sense. I mean an actual fan, because it's very, very warm. So quick look at the comments. Melinda's been using UK ancestry as well as Scottish and Irish, got stuck 5 generations back using these, but was able to trace in reverse. Well, if anybody is new to these videos or new to family history, I say this every week, but you've come to the right place. We have some incredibly knowledgeable people in the comments. Good old group of chums that tune into this most weeks, actually, and are very willing to help any beginners who may have hit a brick wall or just want to start their research themselves. So if you do have any comments, get them in the comments, let us know. And before we start, I know, yeah, I tried to carry say I look warm. That's why I have my fan. I tried on a variety of t-shirts, but they didn't. Oh wow, Anne-Marie Cartwright, hello from Christchurch in New Zealand. Well, Anne-Marie, the story I will be telling in the second half of this video, you are probably very, very familiar with, because I believe I couldn't believe I hadn't heard about the story of the Burgess Gang before. It's so incredible and could make a wonderful film. I think there's actually a play going on about it at the moment in New Zealand. I'm glad you've tuned in, because you can correct me if I get anything wrong, which I shouldn't do. And you will know all that you should know the story relatively well. Anyway, so first up, question of the week. As we're talking about the New Zealand Gold Rush and the Luminaries, I thought quite an open-ended question that anyone can answer. Did any of your ancestors leave their home in search of fame or fortune? They didn't have to have gone overseas. Did they? I mean, I read something recently that said apparently for most of British history, people died within 15 miles of where they were born. So like particularly during the medieval period, people just didn't really leave. And in fact, you see the same going up even to the 20th century, really. I've got certain family members that never went more than 3 or 4 parishes across in the area of Yorkshire they were from. So yeah, where did your ancestors go? Did they go to the New World? Did they try their luck in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, America? Did they look for their fame? Did they go to India? Where did they go? Tell us. I don't have any ancestors that were particularly globetrotting. The only one is some of my military ancestors who were very working class, and one of them in particular joined a cavalry regiment, and that took him to parts of India. It took him to places in the West Indies. It took him to Ireland, and for a working class bloke from 1840s Liverpool, probably would have never got the chance to do that otherwise, and he led a very, very interesting life. So that's someone that I've enjoyed looking at. But yeah, let us know. Get it in the comments. Marcia Boozle, Crivus, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Hello from Chicago. Sharon, hello in Ontario. Claire Bear Stoyle, question for you. When families emigrated to America, when did different people suddenly change within the family, their religion? Oof, I guess it depends on the family. That is quite a tough one. I'm gonna put that to the audience. If anyone watching can answer that, get it in the comments. Right, no time to spare, so let's have a look at the records we have this week. So it is Friday, and every Friday we release brand new records, and this week is no different. So one of the things I'm very pleased to announce is our Catholic Heritage Archive is continuing to grow, with a brand new archdiocese joining our collection. We've added over 213,000 baptisms, over 126,000 marriages, and 52,000 marriages, 126,000 congregational records, and 378,000, so basically over 400,000 sacramental registers and congregational records for the Archdiocese of Southwark. This mainly covers Catholic parishes, I think actually exclusively covers Catholic parishes in Kent and Surrey. But brilliant records and images exclusive to us, digitized in partnership with the Archdiocese of Southwark themselves, and we're very, very happy to have them. I can't remember the total number of parishes it covers, but that's it. 70 Catholic parishes across Kent and Surrey, spans the years 1781 to 1910. So nice big wide date range there for you as well. And of course, what are sacramental registers? Well, they're effectively Catholic parish registers of baptisms, marriages, burials. One thing to bear in mind when you're searching Catholic records is that traditionally, obviously, Latin was the everyday performative language of the Catholic Church, and therefore a lot of Catholic record keeping was traditionally in Latin. I mean, it shouldn't be too problematic because records for particular times and places tended to follow common formats, which means there are key elements that you can pick out and use to extract info, even if you're not fully au fait with Latin. It is a dead language after all. I think I did it at GCSE, and the only thing I can remember is Caecilius in Mensa Stat, which I think is Caecilius is standing on the table, or Caecilius is standing in the hallway, one of the two. So yeah, my Latin is not good. Things that could help, I don't know if you want to make a note of this, is Latin is a language in which proper nouns, such as forenames, may decline to show grammatical case, if that makes sense. So to give you an example of that, depending on a sentence structure, a male forename may be written in the nominative case, like so maybe Jacobus or something like that. The accusative case, which would be Jacobum, or the genitive case, Jacobi. And there's equivalents for women. So a little bit of Google reading, just brush up on some very, very, very basic Latin. It might help. Also, those examples I highlighted above, like Jacobus, Jacobum, Jacobi, a priest may use Latin versions of Christian names, that's a prime example of that. So that is also something to be aware of. So, most forenames in English have multiple equivalents in European languages. John has equivalents in things like Evan, Giovanni, Hans, even Ivan, Jan, Jean, Johann. There's loads of them. But to a Latin-speaking priest, all of these would have been rendered simply as Johannes on a register. So yeah, do a little bit of reading of Latin names. I think some of the collections may even have keys just to help you decipher some of those bits. But yeah, hopefully, if you've got Catholic ancestors in Kent and Surrey, these will help you find out more. And as well as looking for ancestors, they shed interesting light on the history of Catholic communities in those regions as well. As we discussed a couple of weeks ago, Catholics in Britain have had quite a tumultuous history, which leads me on very nicely to our new National Archives collection, the one that I think is very, very interesting and matches our current existing collections of Jacobite Rebellion records very nicely. So this collection is called England and Wales Roman Catholics 1717. And it takes a bit of explaining what these pertain to. So what we've basically done here, when I say we, I mean Findmypast, is we've digitized a load of series. How many series was it? Let me just remind myself. Yes, so it is 211 pieces from the FEC1 series of the National Archives. That probably won't mean anything to you, so I'll give you the full name. Fortified Estates Commission, Abstracts of Estates of Popish Recusants. Quite a mouthful, but don't worry, I will explain that. These are basically documents that were produced before a commission called the Commission of Fortified Estates. And what this commission basically did was administer the seizure of estates held by people charged of treason during the Jacobite Rebellion of 1715. And if you're not familiar with the Jacobite Rebellion, I'm not going to give you a full history breakdown of it, because you know what I'm like. I'll be here all afternoon. But basically, Jacobite Rebellion of 1715, it was one of a number of Jacobite rebellions. There was another very prominent one in 1745, the one in 1715, sometimes called the 15 or the Lord Mars Revolt. And basically, it was an attempt by James Francis Edward Stuart, also known as the Old Pretender, to regain the throne of England, Ireland, and Scotland for the exiled House Stuart. Apologies if you know all this already, but I think it's probably worth just skimming over very quickly to lay the groundwork. So in 1688, Britain had the Glorious Revolution. That deposed James II and replaced him with Catholic James II, and replaced him with his Protestant daughter, Mary, and her Dutch husband, William, famously William of Orange. And they were going to be joint ruling monarchs, and that ended the reign of James and basically ended the Catholic line of the Stuart dynasty. However, the Stuart supporters did not go quietly into the night. Their supporters, the Jacobites, completely refused to accept this revolution or the political settlement that followed. And for generations, I think 3 generations to be exact, the Stuarts, the Jacobites, and their European allies, many of whom were in France, spent a lot of time carefully plotting the return. It's like something like Game of Thrones, carefully plotting the return of the Stuarts to power. And for a 70-year period, the British Isles was constantly threatened by all these conspiracies and uprisings and threats of foreign invasion from Catholic France or Spain. So the Jacobites were constantly waiting and watching. And for them, every serious crisis that faced Britain after the Glorious Revolution was a chance for them to get back in. And England in 1714 and 1715 was in complete political turmoil. So this presented them with a really, great opportunity to get in there and return the Stuarts to power. Basically, you have the Whigs and the Tories fighting it out for power. You have Queen Anne dying in 1714, and her heir, I guess, George Ludwig, the Elector of Hanover, succeeded her. And when he did, the Tories were outraged to find out that he strongly favoured the Whig party. And so you had the Tories and the Whigs going at it, and then you also had the Act of Union, which had taken place in 1707. So that had added loads of political tension as well. So all these different strands of political alienation and anger and stuff were brought together by the Jacobite alternative king, James III, or the 8th, who was the son of James II and James VII. So I'm probably going into too much detail here. Anyway, so during 1714, they this is our chance. They raised the banner in Scotland. Waves of rioting rippled across England in the summer of 1714, and the Jacobite uprising was begun, I guess. So in Scotland, Jacobite Scots, they were encouraged by all the disorder in England, and they began preparing this uprising. And George I and his ministers got wind of this grand conspiracy and swiftly arrested all the Tories leaders in England and failed to catch the Jacobite leaders in Scotland, which led to the rising in 1745, all that kind of stuff. And you had interesting figures like a chap called John Erskine, who was the Earl of Mar, and he escaped from London to the Highlands, where he started the Scotland-wide Rising, and there was he raised the Jacobite standard at Braemar in March 1715, and that's when the uprising began in full. I won't go into the details of the battles, but basically it was put down. A lot of Jacobite prisoners were tried for treason and sentenced to death. But what it also meant was that a lot of these tried for treason could have their estates and land seized. And that's what these records pertain to. So this, the records were, the commission was formed by an Act of Parliament in 1715, and this appointed commissioners to inquire into the estates of, in the words of the Act itself, certain traitors and popish recusant Catholics. And it gave them the power to raise money out of their estates for the use of the public, as they'd say. So anyone who was accused of high treason, their land was declared to be forfeited. It was vested in the crown. and it could be seized without, as the Act said, without further office or inquisition. So it could basically just be seized, and that's what these records are. So let's have a look. What kind of things can they tell you? So you've got a variety of different document types in here. A lot of it consists of abstracts of estates. So these usually incorporated alphabetical lists of convicted Catholics. Because part of this act in 1715 meant that any Catholics had to register, and so they could be followed, I guess, and tracked. And the abstracts of their estates are available in this collection. Returns would include things like, I don't know if valuations was given, but it'll give you a description of the estate itself. You'll also find a large collection of deeds and other documents that were produced before the commission. So to give you a rundown of the kind of things in there, you'll get original claims forfeited to the Crown. You'll get proceedings of the commissioners themselves. You'll get correspondence, discussing the fate of certain estates and whether they could be seized. Minutes, accounts, lists and schedules, as I said, inventories, returns by clerks, information on lands given to superstitious uses. I love that description. And many of these don't date from just that era. Some of them date back to the 16th century. For the most part, they're arranged under the names of attainted persons, which is a great use of phraseology, isn't it? That's what many of these people were described as, attainted persons. So yeah, just to summarise, as I said before, in 1715, Catholics were obliged to register their names and their real estates in England, Wales, with clerks of the peace, and this commission had the power to seize that land if they thought they had cause to do so. So if your ancestors ever owned any property that was seized by the commission, or applied to take ownership of land that was seized by the commission, you probably will find them in those records. So very, very interesting collection. Very, very happy to have them. Let's have a quick look at some of the comments we're getting in. Question of the week. So Anya's saying, my 2 times great-grandfather moved to Borneo. Oh, wow. And somewhere in Africa to do some gold mining. I mentioned a while ago how he wrote to the newspapers in Wigan with some information on his experiences while he was away. He did come back. His family remained in the UK. He ended up putting his money into several businesses which were left to my great-grandfather. You kindly share the newspaper clipping. Thank you very much. Linda Debbie said, second time great-grandfather came to England from the USA sometime between 1830 and 1861. He worked as a puddler in the ironworks. Was it common to emigrate back then? Yes, actually. It came to England from the USA. Oh, I don't know about that. I know emigration from England to the USA was very common up until probably the Second World War, much more common than people realise. That's a good question. Hopefully someone watching might be able to answer that. Sylvia's saying one of the anti-vaxxers from the town where I would now live emigrated to avoid vaccination. Was later found dead in a hut in the Australian goldfields. Wow. And I think you've sent a link as well. Linda Salton, mine were at the Battle of Pinkie Clough. Oh, wow. Ooh, Linda, and you've just reminded me, the other thing I wanted to mention was, if, like Linda, you have ancestors that were involved in Jacobism or either of the rebellions in 1715 or 1745, a collection you must try is our collection of Scotland's Jacobite Rebellions, 1715 and 1745. You can find it in our A to Z of record searches. And Ellie, if you're watching, it'd be great if you could pop a link into the comments. So this is another National Archives collection. Again, very, very expansive. It contains all sorts, from lists of prisoners to those being banished, those pardoned, again, correspondence, commission records, briefs of evidence. Really, really historically rich, mixed bag. You will find a lot in there. And it covers both the rebellion of 1715 and the rebellion of 1745. I also believe that our prisoner of war collection as well has quite a large number of records for prisoners captured. Oops, sorry, just got an email popping up. Anya's saying horrible aftermath of Pinky Clef, they say many of the locals hid in the mines, and when the English soldiers left, they smoked out the mine, and those inside suffocated. Karen de Bruyne said, my husband's two Stormont cousins were Jacobites. One was sentenced to death, but was then exiled to St. Kitts. Oh wow! Have any of you guys actually found them in our Jacobite records? If you have, I would love to know. Sylvia said, Bobbin, John's wife, the Countess of Mar, was sister of Lady Mary Wortley Montague, who championed smallpox inoculation in England in 1721. It's amazing how history overlaps. Paul, hi Paul, great to see you, glad you're here. Terry Taylor Barker saying loyalists fled to Canada and the West Indies and or back to England after the American Revolution in the late 1780s. All these, yeah, it's amazing. All the different strands of history that you can follow in different directions. Karen Alcourt, one of my great uncles went to Queen Bean in Australia, and his daughter-in-law wrote letters back to her family in England. They have been transcribed and are online. Oh wow! If you don't mind sharing that with us, Karen, I would love to have a read of those myself. Right. So very quickly, those are not the only records we've added this week. So as well as so just to summarise, we've got new Catholic Sacramental Registers of baptisms, marriages, and burials for Archdiocese of Southwark, about 70 parishes across Kent and Surrey. We've got our fascinating new England and Wales Roman Catholic 1717, which will provide you with loads of different assorted documentation on the estates of Catholics seized after the Jacobite Rebellion. And I was also saying, if you do have Jacobite ancestors, be sure to check out our other Jacobite collections. Just go to the A to Z of record search on Findmypast, pop in Jacobite, and everything you will need should appear before your eyes. So the other records we've added this week, we haven't forgotten that Canada Day is next week, so we thought we would get in early and we would release a load of new Canada records in a place I know I'm going to have difficulty pronouncing. So Saskatchewan, I think that's it, isn't it? Saskatchewan, Canada Saskatchewan Vital Records Birth Index. We've got about 64,000 birth records from the province of Saskatchewan. These will tell you things like name, birth year, birth date, where your ancestor was born, and the names of their parents. So very, very, very useful for adding previous generations onto your family tree. We've also got a Vital Records Death Index as well, which will tell you similarly name, birth and death date, place of death, and parents' names. So unusually for a death index, just as good for uncovering the previous generation. And I was reading a bit about Saskatchewan. Sorry if I'm getting that wrong. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it like it's a Chinese city. It's changed remarkably during its history. The population, I mean, it's got a very, very interesting history. It's had loads of immigration during the 20th century. Obviously, originally it was populated by the native population who were obviously there first. But then French and British immigrants arrived during the early 18th and 19th centuries, which led to a very kind of interestingly rich mixed population with all kinds of different heritages. And then you had loads of Germans, Austrians, Scandinavians, Poles, Eastern Europeans from like Ukraine, Russia getting there in the 1880s. So all kinds of people are in these records. Very interesting. And then last but not least, we've added some new newspapers, the Beeston Gazette and Echo, the Maidenhead Advertiser, and we've also added new pages to the Dundee Courier, the Derby Daily Telegraph. So that is your records for this week. Another quick look at the comments. Question of the week is Paul has said, question of the week, my cousin Victoria Kingley travelled the world collecting songs. Oh, wow. And she played an instrument made from a carapace of a hairy armadillo. I hope you still have that in your possession, Paul, or someone in your family did. She lived till she was 100 and died in 2000. She became quite well known. Well, I'm not surprised. Oh, thank you, David. David's just telling me my pronunciation was close enough. Good. And Terry Taylor Barker saying I was saying it right. Thank you, guys. For once, I didn't massacre the pronunciation. So, but Paul, yeah, that is an amazing story. So she's an ethnomusicologist by the sound of it. The only reason I say that is because there's another guy called, was it Alan Lomax? Let me just check. Alan Lomax. Yes, I'm a big music fan. I'm very into, um, kind of music history and folk songs and folk history and all that kind of thing. So Victoria Kingsley's work I would find very interesting. I'm going to be looking her up, Paul. But yeah, or check out a guy called Alan Lomax as well. He was an American ethnomusicologist who he travelled the Appalachian Mountains, recording all the folk songs up there. He recorded chain gangs in Mississippi State Penitentiary, singing their work songs. He did a tour of the east of England, I think, recording old Cornish. Amazing, and the recordings are so crisp. Doesn't sound like they were recorded 70, 80 years ago. Yeah, it's just my recommendation for some weekend reading. Right, story time. I did say we were going to look at it. So, who has been watching The Luminaries, or have you read the book? If you haven't heard of it before, The Luminaries was a novel that was written in 2013 by a lady called Eleanor Catton, and it was set on New Zealand's South Island in 1886. And it follows a chap called Walter Moody, who was a gold prospector who travelled to the fledgling west coast settlement of Hokitika. Hockey, Hokitika, yeah, that's it. To try and make his fortune in the nearby goldfields. He gets there, great ideas. I'm going to make it big. I'm going to strike rich, but instead he stumbles into a tense conspiracy. I don't want to give too much away because I haven't read it myself. I'm going off the what's it called, the blurb. He's drawn into a tense meeting of 12 local men and drawn into this complex mystery of covering up a series of unsolved crimes and murder and all that kind of stuff. Well, my own research into Hokitika has revealed that the place was just as fascinating, if not more fascinating, than the events described in the novel, as is often the case. Paul Van Dude, talking musicologist, John C.G. Waterhouse, when I'm checking out. Wow, Paul, you've got some musical heritage there. Ali said it's also got a fantasy element to it too. But anyway, we're talking about real history, something that really happened. And I just think this story is amazing. So, as they say, fact is often more remarkable than fiction, and this is definitely the case with the story of the Burgess Gang and the terrible murders they committed. So, little bit of context. So, gold rush on the South Island pretty much populated the west coast. Up until then, it was not really. I mean, it was certainly inhabited by Maoris, but it hadn't been visited by Europeans. And gold was first discovered there in about 1864 by two Maori men. And I bet they wished they'd kept their discovery quiet, because as soon as they did, gold prospectors from all over the world, but primarily from Australia. Victorian gold rushes had already happened. They knew what they were doing. A lot of them came over to try and find gold there. There'd also been a gold rush in Otago, Central Otago, another part of New Zealand. So basically, people flocked there in their thousands, and Hokitika exploded. The population exploded. By 1866, basically in 1864, to give you an idea, there were an estimated 1,800 prospectors on the west coast, most of them in Hokitika. But by 1866, so literally 2-3 years later, it was the most populous settlement in New Zealand, with a population of more than 25,000, and it boasted more than 100 pubs, which really shows you how. Sorry, I'm watching myself back, which will tell you how incredibly significant that region was. So, I was going to do some screen sharing, but it looks like I can't. Oh, that's a shame. Because I'd even made some slides to show you. Let me sorry. Just going to see if I can share my screen. No, we'll give up on that. I will post some pictures in the comments when I'm done, so you can see what all these people and places looked like. So anyway, back to Hokitika. So start the story off by talking about the guy who opened Ellie's messaging. I would have had to have used Zoom. That's where I erred. Right, I know for next time. It's a shame because I did spend some time putting some slides together. But I'll post the pictures in the comments so you can see what these guys look like, because their faces are amazing. Right, back to the story. So when gold was first discovered, the Canterbury Provincial Council in Christchurch tasked this guy called Edward Dobson, who was a British engineer, to open up the region by finding every possible pass from the west coast to big watersheds on the major rivers, which would basically allow gold to be passed through very quickly. It would allow them to build roads. It was a huge project, and Dobson was in charge of this project, and the road was completed in 1866. And the reason I mention Dobson is because the Dobson family are very important in this story. So when the Burgess Gang had been operating for quite a while in the region, but it wasn't until they killed Edward Dobson's son, George Dobson, that the authorities really sprung into action and took note. In fact, Edward Dobson they're a very, very prominent family in New Zealand and in Britain as well. So Edward was born in 1816. His father was a merchant, John Dobson. His wife was Elizabeth Barker, and they were members of this very prominent Dobson Collett family. Both names you will be aware of if you live in probably if you live in Australia or New Zealand. So his brother was this famous radical freethinker and chartist called Collett Dobson Collett. His older brother, Alfred Dobson, was a very well-known surveyor in Australia and New Zealand. His sister, Sophia Dobson Collett, was a very early feminist. She wrote for The Spectator. His uncle was the famous British military officer and explorer, Collett Barker, who discovered, or I should say explored, not discovered, who explored vast areas of South Australia, Western Australia. I think he's got a mountain named after him, as well as some towns. And Edward Dobson's niece was Clara Collett, who was one of the first ever graduates from the University of London. And she was pivotal in loads of reforms that improved working conditions for women in the early 20th century. She did some really interesting work mapping the poor. So yeah, that's just to show that the Dobsons and Colletts were very, very influential. But anyway, who were the Burgess Gang? It all started with a guy called Richard Burgess, and I can't wait to show you his picture. I'll post all the pictures in the comments after this. Richard Burgess may have been the most prolific murderer New Zealand has ever seen. It's estimated that his gang of outlaws killed anywhere from 5 up to 35 people. It could have been even higher. But the reason his story is so rich is that he kind of told it himself. Before his execution, he penned a 46-page confession, which Mark Twain, the famous American author, actually described as without peer in the literature of murder. But as well as the killing of poor George Dobson, the crimes the gang were most well known for were the so-called Maungatapu murders. And these collective crimes saw all but one of the gang hanged. The lone survivor was a chap called Joseph Sullivan, who basically turned traitor to save his own skin. So this is such a great story. It would make a brilliant TV series on its own. So anyway, what happened? So Richard Burgess led a very, very interesting life. He was actually born in London. He went by the alias of Richard Hill. He was born in Hatton Garden in 1829, and he was the illegitimate son of a lady's maid and someone connected with the Horse Guards, apparently. His father's name was never really identified. When he was a child, he and his mother moved to the East End, where, just like something out of a Dickens novel, he was recruited to a gang of pickpockets called the City Arabs. And he was very soon in trouble with the law. You can find him in our collection of crimes, prisons, and punishment records, just age 14, getting imprisoned and flogged for pickpocketing. So he was, like one of Fagin's pickpockets at 14, running around the East End as one of the City Arabs stealing. As with many of these gangs, the older he got, the more proficient he became in crime. And by 16, he graduated to housebreaking. And he was caught and sentenced to 15 years transportation. And you can see all this in our collection of crime records. England and Wales, crimes, prisons, and punishments. And his very typical story of a Victorian criminal. He spent 20 months solitary confinement in British prisons, until when he was about 18, he was finally shipped to Melbourne, arriving there in September 1847. He was released, but it was a conditional release, which meant he could live in Australia, but he was barred from ever returning to England. So he picked up work as a stonemason and assumed the alias Dick Hill, but his law-abiding ways did not last for long. He was described as a smart, dapper little fella, about 5 feet 4.5 inches. He had a fresh complexion, brown hair, hazel eyes, and he very quickly joined a gang of roaming criminals that roved the goldfields of Melbourne, who would rob miners. Very easy pickings. These men were often alone in the middle of nowhere, camping under the stars. If they had gold, there was the chance they'd have gold on them, very valuable. If they didn't have gold on them, they might have expensive tools, clothes, things that could be stolen and sold on. And this was really, really common. I think the kind of frontier regions of Australia and New Zealand sounded just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than certain regions of the American West. So he started his violent criminal career in Australia, and it got pretty serious pretty fast. So in 1852, he was sentenced to 10 years in the incredibly brutal Melbourne Gaol, and he spent some of his sentence on board prison hulks. He tried twice to escape from these, as he described this as them himself in his own confession, floating hells of misery, he called them. And so he tried to escape twice. The second time in 1856, he joined an escape group that was led by the infamous bushranger Captain Melville, who was also called Frank McCullum, and 3 people died. It was a deadly escape. 3 people died, including a policeman. 9 of the defendants at the policeman's murder trial, including Burgess, escaped hanging on technicalities. And it was his time in the prison hulks that some have argued made them. So I'm just seeing comments. Turned him into the monster that he soon became. He determined that he was never going to go back to a prison hulk, and therefore made the decision that it was easier just to never leave any witnesses. So he was finally released after this hellish 10-year sentence in 1859, only to be rearrested again for burglary, but he used his alias, so was able to receive a light sentence. And this was the point that Burgess realised, okay, Australia's too hot. I can't stay here now, too hot for me. So he fled to Australia. Melbourne Gaol, that's the information. Melbourne Jail? So I was just saying Terry Taylor Barker. That's what I've got from my reading into the case. So moved over to Australia, moved from Australia to New Zealand, and this is where he forms his Burgess Gang. So in 1862, he heads to the Otago goldfields, where he joined forces with a load of his Australian former cellmates, including his right-hand man, a chap called, jail. Yeah, sorry, you're right. It's been very hot. Very hot. Long week. I know it's jail. Long week. Warm weather. So yeah, joined by his former and his right-hand man, Thomas Kelly, who went by the alias Noon. And as soon as Kelly and Burgess joined forces, things got violent quite quickly. Same year, pronounced jail, sorry. Noted. So that same year, he and Kelly had a very fearsome shootout with police, and they were sent down for another 3 years. Burgess claimed that those charges were actually false and that they were purely trying to get him on technicalities. According to his confession, this is when he vowed to take revenge on society. And I think when he was flogged, he said he was going to take a life for every lash he received. And he certainly tried his best to do so. So, Burgess and Kelly released in 1865, and they arrive in Hokitika in 1866, which is exactly the same year the Luminaries novel and show is set. So exactly the same time period. So when he gets to Hokitika, he realizes this place is great. The local police have got no resources. They can't place us under surveillance. There's hardly any police officers, and there's loads of miners and loads of land. So he and Kelly started recruiting others and resumed a life of roaming the goldfields in gangs, which Burgess would form himself for specific jobs. He was always the leader. So he'd come up with a job, he'd recruit a gang, they'd go out and do it. Next, he met the other main figure in the Burgess gang, a chap called Joseph Flash Tom Sullivan, who was got great names. I can't wait. I wish I'd got my slides because their pictures, they look like Oliver Reed. Burgess himself looks like Oliver Reed's depiction of Bill Sykes. Big burly, big shoulders, big mutton chops, balding, sullen face like that, just terrifying looking blokes. So he recruited this prize fighter, Flash Tom Sullivan, who became the third member of the core Burgess gang. And then finally, they recruited a professional fence, a guy who would dispose of the proceeds of their robberies, a guy called William Levy, also known as Philip Levy. So we went by this alias, Phil Levy. And once this gang was formed, they started robbing banks. They robbed a bank at Buller. They then caught a steamer to the Nelson Southwest Goldfields, and this is where they did one of the most daring crimes. They actually raided the police headquarters at Hokitika, not once, but twice. They raided it twice. They stole loads of weapons. They stole police uniforms for a bank robbery, and prepared to rob this bank. I think when they got to Nelson, I think they got to Nelson or somewhere, they realised the bank wasn't there, so they were already in a bad mood, and this is when they decided to kind of head off into the wilderness and start robbing miners. So they went to North Greymouth on the 26th of May, and that is when young George Dobson had the terrible misfortune to stumble across the gang. They were actually lying in wait for a gold buyer called E.B. Fox, who they knew was coming that way. They knew he was coming, so he'd be carrying large quantities of cash to buy gold off the gold miners at Hokitika. And almost like the Luminaries, Fox had a supernatural premonition. He sat out and thought, I don't like the feel of this. I'm going to go by river. So he went by boat and avoided the gang, fortunately for him, because if they found him, they would have killed him. George Dobson came across them instead. And to give you an idea of how savage this gang was, they knew Dobson. They knew he was. He was a well-known surveyor in the region. They knew he didn't have they knew he wouldn't be carrying cash. So they decided to basically murder him out of nothing other than frustration. Karen saying, much nicer than it sounds. And Linda saying, Buller is a wilderness, used to live in Nelson and have visited the ghost mining settlements. Whoa, that's fascinating. So Burgess and his gang may have camped out a couple of yards from where you were walking. So the murder of Dobson was actually quite awful, actually. Let me see if I can get a description from the Illustrated Times. So they said, so this is an extract. It says, the four villains above mentioned were on the lookout for Mr. Fox. Undeterred by rumours, Mr. Dobson started. There'd been rumours that strange men had been sighted. He was cruelly murdered by these ruffians who had no reason for taking his life beyond their range of disappointment at finding him and not Mr. Fox in their power. As Mr. Dobson never made his appearance, suspicion was aroused. A search was made. It really awful. He was killed for no other reason than frustration. But they didn't stop there. It got even worse. So I think once they killed Dobson, they realised, hang on, this guy's well known. We might have made a mistake here. So they fled. So they fled to the declining Buller Diggings goldfields in the hope of robbing the bank there. So this is the bank I was talking about before. This was after they killed Dobson. Got there, the bank had closed. Like, what do we do now? So they were left destitute, and they were forced to walk the rugged, isolated Maungapatu track to Marlborough. So they had to go on foot. They were running low on food. They were getting pretty desperate. And while they were there, they learned that an old acquaintance, a chap called Felix Matthew, who's now a local publican and storekeeper, was about to go down that track with two other businessmen and a miner to investigate prospects in West Canterbury. So they decided that these would be their victims. So they travelled on foot to avoid attracting attention. They believed that these travellers would be carrying money and gold. And according to Burgess, who was the one that according to Burgess, Kelly refused to participate in any hold-up. I think he'd been spooked by the killing of Dobson, and Levy was not told about it. So Burgess and Sullivan travelled on ahead, and en route, they met an old miner called James Battle, who was known as Old Jamie, who became suspicious of the gang, and he was robbed of £3.17, throttled by Burgess and buried. And then on the 13th of June, they stuck up and robbed they finally stuck up and robbed the Matthew party, robbed £300 in gold dust, which was a huge amount of money back then. And to remove all witnesses, they were strangled. A man called James Dudley was strangled. Matthew was shot and then stabbed. A man called John Kempthorne and another American digger called James de Pontius were both shot. And they were... James Pontius was... That was it. They buried one of them to think... So if the police found the bodies, they'd think that the miners had a dispute and killed each other. But anyway, it was after these killings things started to unravel. The authorities noticed that the travellers were missing and hadn't been... The authorities noticed that travellers were missing and hadn't turned up. So a reward was put out, and a poster was put up offering pardon for any accomplice who was not specifically murdered in the killings themselves. Sullivan already believed that his gang members didn't trust him and thought that if he didn't turn them in, they'd kill him as soon as they got the chance. So Sullivan turned informer, and this is when things also get quite interesting, actually, because Sullivan turned on the others, whereas Burgess, no one knows the truth of it, but Burgess seems to be like, right, Sullivan's betrayed us. He tried his best to keep Levy and Kelly to escape the gallows, and basically said it was all me and Sullivan trying to take Sullivan down with him, in effect, really. And Burgess and Kelly represented themselves at the trial. Burgess again, he tried to establish Sullivan as his sole accomplice in the murders and the Mount Mangapatu and the murder of Dobson. And in one trial sitting, he read for 5 hours the confession of Burgess, the murderer, in which he detailed all the many crimes. He exonerated Kelly and Levy, and just said it was Sullivan. And then in prison, he expanded his handwritten confession to this full-scale autobiography, which is on my reading list. I can't wait to read it, but it was banned at the time because the authorities thought it would undermine public morality, basically. So the gang were finally executed on 5th of October, 1866, and Burgess, Kelly and Levy, Sullivan did escape the noose. They became the first executions in the region's history, actually. Levy and Kelly protested their innocence until the last, whereas Burgess was confident and defiant till the end. Apparently, he cheerfully entered the prison yard and declared that he had no more fear of death than he had of going to a wedding. He thanked the various officials and attendants and bowed to them. He bounded up to the scaffold energetically, apparently, and chose the centre rope and kissed it, saying that he greeted it as a prelude to heaven. And thus he was launched into eternity, as the saying goes. Almost immediately after these executions, there was speculation that Burgess might have been telling the truth about the role of Kelly and Levy, and that Sullivan really was the villain. It was Sullivan and Burgess who'd been doing all the murdering, and that Burgess had been disgusted that Sullivan had tried to get the others hanged in his place, so had almost deliberately set out to get himself hanged as long as it would save Levy and Kelly and bring Sullivan down with him. And that led to some reluctant admiration for him, getting himself hanged in the cause of mateship. So he was almost viewed as a slightly romantic figure for a time. Just such a fascinating bloke. awful, murderous, terrible, bad human being. But he was examined by a prominent phrenologist as well, a guy called A.S. Hamilton, who visited his cell, gave he gave a lecture afterwards in which he expressed admiration for the man's virtues, but pity that, in his own words, so much daring, expertness, and ability should have been lost to society by being wrongly directed. Yeah, and I think few people at the time would have disagreed with the declaration that Dick Burgess had no rival either in the magnitudes of his crimes or in the part he acted in his last hour upon earth. So there you go, the fascinating story of the Burgess Gang, the murder of George Dobson, the story of the story of Hockey Tucker and the Gold Rush, and how all the different elements interwove. If you are interested in that, do look up Richard Burgess. I imagine his confession is a fascinating read. There's loads of it on the newspapers. And there's loads of it in our newspaper collection. Just type in Richard Burgess or Mountapatu murders, and you'll get some great illustrations, really vivid descriptions. I mean, I did have an article that I was going to read excerpts to, but we'll be here all afternoon, so I will allow you to. I'll post a link to it in the comments, so you can check it out yourself. But it goes into detail on the killing of old Jamie and one of Sullivan's final confessions, which is the spookiest bit. They know for a fact Burgess killed 5 people. Sullivan says that he believed Burgess was involved in anywhere between 30 and 40 that he knew of, and probably many more. Another tactic he revealed the gang would do would they'd hide bottles of strychnine, they'd bury them along the tracks that they'd haunt. And when they came across a party of men that was too big or strong to attack, they would strike up a friendship, pop the strychnine in their stew, and kill them in their sleep. So to this day, no one really knows how many bodies the Burgess Gang buried along along South Island's west coast. How many they left in New Zealand? I mean, they really are like a kind of gang of Wild West outlaws. So yeah, I will post the newspaper link in the comments so you can see what they look like. I mean, amazing, the scary guys. And I will leave it at that. So thank you to everybody who tuned in and stuck with it. I hope you all have wonderful weekends, and I will see you very, very soon. Stay safe, stay in touch. How do I end the stream? Sorry. Just gotta try and close it now. I'm struggling a bit with this new form of Facebook Live. Right, okay. I think I will leave it there. So thank you very much to everybody tuning in, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye. Have wonderful weekends.